Edition of Be Heard Talk. My name is Selena Hill, and I'm super happy to be with you here today, guys. Welcome to Be Heard Talk. Of course, this is an award-winning talk show that adds a taste of trap music, Asada Shakur, and spice to unflavored news. Each Sunday, we discuss race, politics, and culture from an unapologetic Black millennial perspective, and we give you the opportunity to be heard. So leave your comments on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and we will read them throughout this show. And for the 2020 election season, we've partnered with Black Enterprise as our official media sponsor. Again, I'm Selena Hill. I'm also the digital editor at Black Enterprise and the founder of Be Heard Talk. And I'm super excited to have all of you here with us today because we have a very special featured guest. Her name is Nantasha Williams. She is the New York City Council candidate, the founder of the New York City Black Women's Political Club, and a community mobilizer. So she will be here with us momentarily. But before we get to Nantasha, let me kick things off by introducing two co-hosts to the show. Starting with Stanley Fritz.
You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job.
Oh, my bad. You hear that, Selena?
You about to lose your job because you are detaining me.
I don't know where that's coming from.
You about to lose your job.
All right, I'll turn it down. My fault, Selena. Oh, yo, I don't know where the noise is coming from, Selena. I don't know what's happening here. While the music plays in the background, let me just say, my name is Stanley Fritz. I'm your favorite engineer on the PC ones and twos. You can follow me on Twitter at Stan Fritz. You can follow me on IG at Stan Fritz. Oh, my fault. Sorry. Totally irresponsible of me. I don't know how that music started playing. I'll turn it off. It's off now, Selena. As I was saying, my name is Stanley Fritz. I am the New York State Political Director at Citizen Action of New York. I am the engineer on the PC ones and twos, even though I've been fired by the brilliant, amazing Anaya. And I'm here to talk to you about politics, social justice issues, and why it's okay to be a sore winner. It is very okay to be a sore winner today, guys. Happy Sunday.
Thank you for that, Stanley. We are all very joyous, obviously, because Donald Trump is no longer in office. So thank you for starting things off with you about to lose your job. We also have with us Tammy David.
Hi, everyone. What a beautiful, beautiful Sunday to be alive. Oh, it is incredible to be blessed and Black and living in a blue state. Thanks, y'all. Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy David, and I'm your problematic fave here on Be Heard Talk. And even though I've spent months telling you how whack Biden is, and even though he was not my first, fifth, or even eighth choice of the Democratic nominees, I was out there with the best of them yesterday, including Selena Hill, popping my WAP for democracy. Yes, we did it. It is worth celebrating that the next 4 years will not be dominated by an orange fascist. And essentially, we're going to be harassing Biden to get us what we really want, which is progressive policies, but we are allowed to celebrate. Now, before we get to all of that, it's time for the news roundup, the part of the show where we bring you stories that had us cheering in the streets, laughing on our couches, and lighting now legal joints. This week, we're talking legalization, celebrating Biden's win, and discussing the latest from America's problematic fave, which is Dave Chappelle. For more information on these or any other stories, and to suggest what we should talk about next week, follow and DM us at Be Heard Talk across all platforms. Now, before we get to our joyous news, we have some tragic breaking news for the nation. Alex Trebek, the iconic quizmaster that has led and hosted Jeopardy for the last several dozen years, has fatally passed away from his bout with pancreatic cancer. He was just 80 years old. We knew that he had cancer, and several people had asked him, are you afraid of dying? What comes next? And he's always held it together, especially for his son, Matthew. What can we say other than it sucks to lose an icon? So I'm going to bring my co-hosts in to kind of talk about how we're feeling about this. Selena, how you doing?
Yes, well, that, like you said, he was suffering from pancreatic cancer. Alex Trebek, he lived a very full life. He was 80 years old. So I kind of feel like this is just, as tragic as it is, I think his life is worth celebrating. I think that in the spirit of Black folks, I would look at this as a homegoing service, something that is unfortunate, but I'm so happy about the legacy that he left here. So that's what I would have to say.
When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch TV during school days except for Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and whatever came on PBS Channel 13. So I am very familiar with Alex Trebek. This is a big deal. But yeah, he was 80 years old. He lived a long life. He was also a civil rights activist and organizer. And if you look at pictures of him when he was young, he looks like a biracial king, but apparently he's fully white, which doesn't make any sense to me. Rest in power to Alex Trebek. Thank you for all the great things you did for us. As you can see, I'm so upset my screen is shaking. We're really going to miss you, but, it's been a great time, and wishing love and peace to his family who, lives on his legacy now.
Thanks, y'all. Sending lots of love and light. And for those of you in the New York City area, please go support Oso in Harlem, which is actually owned by his son, and an incredible place to be.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Now up next, I've just heard word that Nantasha has joined us.
Yes.
Selena, can I throw it to you to intro her? I'm so excited to meet her.
Absolutely. So once again, folks, we have with us our featured guest, Nantasha Williams. She is a New York City council candidate, currently running a campaign in Queens, New York. She is also the founder of New York City Black Women's Political Club. Welcome to the show, Nantasha.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me. I'm super
Absolutely
excited. My favorite people.
Well,
yeah,
Nan,
no, of
I always
course.
feel like I'm at home when I'm talking to you guys.
Man, how you pull up here?
You are
Your
home.
hair on 10, the glasses on 10, the
Yo,
makeup.
I gotta run a campaign. I'm trying to look like a candidate.
For love it. Can you
You
please
look great, girl.
take your foot off my neck, but release some pressure so I can breathe, all right?
Anyway, Nantasha, I'm so glad to have you here with us, especially to talk about some of the news stories that we've been faced with this week. So can I just start by asking, what did you do yesterday when you heard the good word?
Yeah, so I actually had to take time to stop and think about the symbolism. So yesterday I actually had a video shoot and a photo shoot for my campaign, which was planned before. Who knew that Pennsylvania was going to certify and take Biden over? And I was like, wow. What are the odds that I'm over here trying to kickstart my campaign and this whole effort that the work is still needed. We still have to keep, get the job done. Getting Biden in office isn't it. So just the whole symbolism of it all. I think I just took a second en route to the next place I was shooting to just say, wow, we really did that. And now what's next, right? Not even missing a beat, just kind of what's next? What does this mean for Black people specifically?
I'm so happy that you're focused on what's next, because like a lot of progressives, right, there was celebration in the streets. I mean, as soon as we heard the tally from Pennsylvania, all of us as New Yorkers, we heard the cowbells, we heard the singing, the honking, the bike bells, the yelling. People went to brunch to celebrate. Different countries started reporting. Everyone was sighing with relief. But as soon as we kind of got that out of the way, a lot of people were wondering, okay, what's next? Because Trump, in a flurry of tweets, began attacking the election results. Republicans and people even on his team, like Jared Kushner, began pushing him to concede and wondering what the Senate race would look like. And progressives started thinking of how they would organize exactly to get what they want from the Biden administration in the next 4 years. So while we're all celebrating and we are extremely ecstatic to have a blue president, we are still awaiting results from Georgia's hotly contested Senate race because we need the Senate for progressive legislation. And we are waiting for the House to be secured blue. Now, while we look to organizing, Republicans are looking to pouting. A lot of them are still out there defending conservative values and agreeing with the president that this election is indeed a fraud. So, you brought us this, Nantasha. Stanley, what is it looking like on the ground? Like, do you predict the Senate actually flipping? And since the House results haven't been announced, do you think that there's a chance that we might lose the House?
No, the House is secure. The House is secure. Democrats will have an 8-person lead. The question is what their politics are going to look like with the reduced lead, because folks are already trying to blame progressive politics for it. The Senate is a different story. There are going to be 2 runoff elections in Georgia to decide those Senate races, because John Ossoff, his race against Bill Perdue was at 50% up until about Friday. He dropped to 49%. And in Georgia, if you don't get 50% of the vote in a Senate race, it goes to a runoff. So there are going to be 2 big elections in Georgia in January. So we got to pull up again, Georgia folks. I've been cracking on y'all all pandemic because y'all ain't never closed. I love you, and I need you to secure the Senate bag, because if you can do that, then we will get the Senate majority, and then we can pass a stimulus. So I'm really nervous but excited about that. But as far as what Biden can do, Chuck Schumer mentioned yesterday that they're proposing Biden forgive on day one $50,000 on everyone's student loan debt, like right off the way. He doesn't need legislation to do that. It can be an executive order. So as somebody who owes Sallie Mae a couple of coins, I'm really hoping that they do that. Senate Republicans don't want to work with Biden at all. So if we can get a tie in the Senate, that means Kamala Harris as a vice president is a tiebreaker. So if we can't get the majority, that's the second best scenario. And you can potentially pass a stimulus with that tiebreaker. So fingers crossed to see what happens over there.
Fingers crossed, and thank you so much for, as always, an incredible political analysis. Shout out to all of you leaving comments right now. I want to especially thank one of our loyal viewers, Bianca. For those of y'all who don't know, Bianca actually voted in Pennsylvania. So thank you, sis, for securing that state. We so appreciate y'all. And thank you to all the viewers who are, thanking us for our work through the election. We recognize y'all. We appreciate y'all. Now, Selena, what are some of the things you're looking forward to seeing Biden work on most? I know that we're going to be pressuring him with progressive policies, but there's really a lot that we've been asking for this year. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Obviously, criminal justice reform. I think that's a big issue. As we know, Black voters, particularly Black women, have remained loyal to the Democratic Party. And we just want to see something reciprocated in return. We want to see, criminal justice reform. Obviously, there's other issues in the Black community that we want to see when it comes to access to healthcare, access to education. We just no longer want to be the neglected and the forgotten communities that continue to show up regardless. And I think that we learned those lessons from 2008 and 2012. And I think that as a result, people are already starting to organize and realize that the real work starts now. Yes, we were energized. We went to the polls and we voted Biden into the presidency, which he can thank us for. But now it's time to really up the ante when it comes to pressure and making sure that our community needs are heard and our agenda is addressed this time around.
Well, let me let you know that this progressive and everyone on this show has already vowed to keep our foot solemnly on their necks to make sure that we get what they're looking for. Another big election win that we should definitely talk about is being lit. Now, jokes aside, I know a lot of people were drinking this week, smoking this week out of anxiety or stress, but quite a few states actually just legalized marijuana for recreational use. Sadly, still not New York. Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota were the latest to bring the right to use, bringing the states tally up to 15 states. Now, one state, however, is worth mentioning because they truly outdid them all. In a first in the nation, Oregon has rejected charging drug users with criminal offenses, with voters passing a ballot measure that decriminalizes possession of heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, oxycodone, and other hard drugs. Now, Drug Policy Alliance, the group behind Measure 110, has declared this initiative, rightfully so, the biggest blow to the war on drugs. Now, before we send people to Oregon to get lit or whatever else y'all are ready to do, let's break down what this really means. So basically, if you are caught with a drug, you will not be charged. Now, that doesn't mean that you can buy drugs at local coffee shops or that it's any easier to attain. What it means is the creation of new policies to deal with drug offenders that sidesweep using the legal system. So instead of charging and jailing offenders, dealers, and users, Oregon is opting to expand addiction recovery centers and healthcare access for those with issues that are either exacerbated by or create the need for drug use. The state is predicting that this law will restrict the number of people with job and housing insecurities, which is usually brought on by unnecessary bouts with the law. Also, this may eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system as a whole. Now, as y'all know, when weed was legalized, the first people to benefit from it were who? Rich white people. And the people who usually don't get charged in drug charges are who? Rich white people. So while this is a new concept for the US, several countries have already successfully tried this initiative. While Portugal, the Netherlands, and Switzerland have already decriminalized possession, Portugal's numbers are extremely hopeful. So they've reported that drug use remains overall stagnant, so it doesn't create new addicts. But drug deaths fall significantly while the number of people treated for drug addictions rises. So with a country like ours that has a significant problem with addiction, Oregon is once again leading the way with a solution. I want to start with you, Nantasha, because you are a candidate in a city that, arguably has quite a bit of drug use. How do you feel about total drug decriminalization? And do you see this as a trend that may come to New York?
I think it's a conversation we need to have. One of the first things that I worked on when I worked for the New York State Assembly with former Assembly member Kareem Kamer was decriminalizing marijuana. It was a bill that Hakeem Jeffries had, but then he went to Congress, and so Kareem took over the bill. And this was almost 7 years ago. And it was right before they started advocating to legalize medicinal marijuana in New York. And the same conversation was had. It's, how do we legalize marijuana without decriminalizing the drugs? And I know Oregon took a huge step because it seems like it's all drugs, not just marijuana. But I think we still need to even have that conversation, right? New Jersey just legalized marijuana, which is literally what? I can get to Jersey in like 20 minutes. But what does that say about decriminalizing people who are currently incarcerated for marijuana drugs? So I think we definitely need to have a conversation. I am for decriminalizing drugs, especially, for drug users, not folks who are actually selling the drugs. I think we need to have a conversation about that. But I am for decriminalizing drugs to the extent that we're trying to legalize certain drugs and people are actually becoming rich off of the sale of drugs.
Stanley, do you think that drug decriminalization actually aids people, or does it just make it easier to access?
Yeah, no, it 100% aids people because drug addiction is a disease, it's a sickness. It's like alcohol addiction, and you need support. You don't need incarceration. What I think is funny, though, is that when we were dealing with a crack epidemic in Black communities, we criminalized it. But now it's white people who are the ones who are dying and overdosing on drugs. And all of a sudden, we understand that you need to give people the right supports so they can take care of themselves. And now we're decriminalizing it. And also, you'll notice the states with the most progressive drug policies tend to be homogenous states. And what I mean by that are states where there's really only a dominant one racial demographic. In Oregon, Portland, it's mostly white people. It's like 3% Black people there. So it's a lot easier for them to legalize it there or decriminalize it because you have fewer people worried about giving rights to Black and brown folks. So it happened in Portland, and I'm happy for them. I'm not confident in how successful that will be in New York State. We're having trouble just getting it legalized here.
And Selena, to wrap the conversation, let's comment on what Stanley said. Now, Oregon is primarily white, and as we know, the opioid epidemic is a huge spur of this progressive policy. I mean, it's mainly white people who are suffering from opioid addiction. Do you think this initiative was a result of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, racial politics affect every single thing in this country. This country was embedded on white supremacy and it continues to reign supreme. I do want to just note that, Measure 110 is arguably the biggest blow to the war on drugs to date. And I'm happy about it because I do think it will have a domino effect. And also, Oregon was the first state to also legalize marijuana back in the 1970s. So they've been pioneering in this space for a long time. But I do want to say that, speaking of the drug addiction in this state in particular, 1 in 11 residents of Oregon are addicted to drugs, and nearly 2 people die from an overdose every single day. And these statistics are alarming. And I feel like, yes, one of the first steps in addressing this epidemic is decriminalizing it so that these people can get the help they need. But what are some of the underlying issues that are going on? Like when I read that, I was just like, hold on, what is going on in society? What is going on in this state? What is going on in our country where people are, addicted to drugs at alarming rates, committing suicide, and also, overdosing? Something's wrong. And yes, we need to take these steps, but there's a lot more work we need to do.
Yeah, I think the answer for that is pretty simple. It's called racism. So when people were going to the hospital, doctors were more likely to give white people super strong painkillers than Black people because hospitals and doctors and nurses tend to think that Black people are they have a higher pain tolerance, so they don't give them that medicine. And then these pain medicines were highly addictive. And when white people couldn't get access to that anymore, they had to find another way, which was heroin, which is significantly cheaper and easier to get. And then you got a whole bunch of heroin addictions. And then when heroin got really popular in these same white communities, they started mixing it with fentanyl. Why? Because fentanyl is cheaper than heroin. And then they were mixing it wrong. A lot of people were dying. And all of a sudden now you had a heroin addiction crisis in white neighborhoods and also a fentanyl addiction. And the only way you can really address it and give people the services they need is if you show that they are addicted and they are not a criminal. So what do? They change the laws.
Now, before we wrap up the news roundup, I just want to leave you with this little nugget of information. Like Stanley said, addiction is not necessarily just, a personal issue. It is a health issue. It is a public service issue. So if you're struggling with addiction, please call the SAMHSA hotline, the national helpline, 1-800-662-4357, and they'll be able to get you confidential, free help from public health agencies. Thank you so much for everyone who stayed tuned through the news roundup. To hear what we thought about Dave Chappelle's monologue last night, follow us at Be Heard Talk and check out our Instagram stories. Now I'm going to toss this to Selena so that we can get to the main segment that we've been dying for. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Tammy. And yeah, I want to just say that people are celebrating in the streets. Obviously, there's a lot to celebrate. Donald Trump is no longer president, and I'm super happy Stanley kicked off the show just sort of reflecting the mood and the sentiment of this time. This is a photo at the White House where hundreds of people came out in droves to say, Donald Trump, you are fired. You are about to lose your job. I actually was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I shot some video footage that I want you guys to see. I started off at Central Park. I walked down the street, and all of a sudden, I saw so many people in the streets waving flags of pride, Biden and Harris. We even started doing the Cupid shuffle. It was also I don't want to say a multiracial coalition of us, but it was mostly white folks. Obviously, it's the Upper West Side, but I think it was so heartening to see that, especially because we know that it's been white people who elected Donald Trump, and again, they came to the polls again in 2020 to keep him elected. So we're gonna play some of those clips and some of that footage that we have. And I know, shout out to Tia Murray Whitted on Facebook, who just says, "Bye Trump." Again, these celebrations were going on all over. I know Stanley was able to get some as well. He was downtown in Manhattan, even in Harlem. It was all over. So we definitely want to just talk about that and just share that sentiment, because, you know, for me, I wasn't sure that Donald Trump was going to be, you know, out of a job. I really thought he was going to be reelected. So, you know, when those election results came in, I think it was about 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. You know, people were shouting, people were screaming, people were, you know, in the streets celebrating. It felt like almost that Obama was reelected. Do we have the clips? Footage that we could play.
Yo, I was riding my bike because I was in Harlem when I found out, and I was just gonna ride from like my side of Harlem to East Harlem to see what was going on. So I rode from my side. I'm on West Harlem. I rode to East Harlem. It was turned up over there. Old Spanish ladies dancing with each other. People in the street celebrating. Then I went to Central Harlem to Little Africa. It was lit kid over there. And then I rode back to my neighborhood and rode all the way down to 59th Street, Columbus Circle. When I tell you there was a party on every block, people were popping champagne. They were passing out redacteds because, you know, marijuana's not legal in New York State yet. There were cops crying. Hey, it was wonderful. I got to Columbus Circle. There was wall-to-wall people. There was music blasting. It was, I'm telling you, for someone who was in college when Barack Obama won his first election, it wasn't quite as magical as that night. For Black folks, I think that night is a little bit different for all of us. But it was pretty damn cool. It was a great vibe. I'm glad I got to witness it.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, even though we're celebrating this time, I also think that it almost felt a little bittersweet, this victory. First of all, the election was prolonged, the results, as we know, and most of us expected, because a record-breaking number of early voters came out and cast their ballots, either, you know, by mailing in their ballots, or, you know, just doing early voting. But I feel like it was disheartening to see that, you know, Donald Trump again was this close to victory. It was Black voters, and particularly Black women, that came out in droves to save the soul of this nation. And while some of political operatives and some others thought that this election was going to be decided by Donald Trump's mythical all-white suburbs and some of those stay-at-home moms, it was Joe Biden's ability to actually convert them. It was instead a racially diverse coalition of folks in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. In fact, Black people, who make up 39% or more of the population in those areas, they chose Joe Biden. And it was because of that. It was because of those people in Philly, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Atlanta that he reached 270 electoral votes. Exit polls also revealed that 87% of Black voters back Biden, compared to just 12% for President Donald Trump, which is why he won. And also, according to the exit polls, Trump claimed about like 18% of the vote from Black men and 8% from Black women, which was an increase from 2016. But again, because Joe Biden maintained nearly 90% of our vote, he won. And though it was great to see everyone coming out and celebrating in the streets yesterday, the fact of the matter is this country is still very racist. And the fact that a president who is widely viewed as racist, according to polls, the fact that he commanded so many white votes, even after downplaying a pandemic that killed over 230,000 Americans, is chilling. But it was Trump's ability to make this presidential race so close, so close after what America has seen and heard these last 4 years, that really showed us that white people, they have ignored and will suppress and deny explicit racism in order to hold on to white supremacy. So that's the angle and the lens that we really wanted to unpack the 2020 election results. And that's the discussion that we really want to have here on Be Heard Talk. And I want to, open this conversation up to the panel. I'll actually throw it back at you, Stanley. Were you surprised by the election results?
No. And I'm assuming you're asking me about how many white people came out and supported Trump.
Yes.
No. They did a poll a couple of weeks ago, and it showed that Trump still had over 50% of white voter support. I'm not surprised at all. White people, in every single moment they have had, will always choose supremacy over their own self-interest. And the fact of the matter is, we need to do a lot of work with white people. We need to be organizing in white rural communities. And when I say we, I don't mean my black behind or any black person on this panel. The white folks. That's y'all problem. So the white people who were celebrating on 148th Street and Broadway, take it behind somewhere to Erie County, New York, go to Alabama and talk to those white folks, because white supremacy is not just going to kill them, it is going to kill all of us. And this false dichotomy that white people voted because they don't like socialism or crime, it's BS. It's because of white supremacy. So I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised that 68 million people supported Donald Trump. I've been saying it for the last 4 or 5 years. White people are racist. I think my point has been proven with an election now.
Tammy, I want to throw it to you now. Why was this election so close?
Because that's easy. Why would people want to change the status quo that is working for them? I mean, the people who are not disenfranchised in this country will do, and let me clarify, white people with money, power, and privilege who are not disenfranchised in this country will do whatever it takes to hold on to that power. Now, it makes sense to me that so many people voted for him. And I was surprised at the results, because honestly, I thought more people would show out to protect that power. But our side was clearly stronger. Now, people with a vested interest like racism or their financial gain on the backs of like third world countries, those are the people showing up, donating, making sure that their conservative interests are at play. So that's why they're showing up. That's why they're protecting it.
We actually have a comment from LaTanya Woodson, who actually holds a PhD via LinkedIn. LaTanya says racism is alive and well, and I did just want to acknowledge that, LaTanya, because we agree here on the panel. And thank you so much, guys, for leaving those comments. Keep them coming. We will continue to read them throughout the show. Nantasha, same question for you. Were you surprised by the results, the number of, people who still came out and support him, and the fact that Donald Trump nearly won this election?
Lena, I think I was more like you. I just wasn't sure that we were going to be able to pull it off because the Democratic Party is rather interesting. And Joe Biden, by any means, was not the candidate of gab or choice, especially for me. So I wasn't shocked. I think the thing that was really shocking to me is how close he was in various states, right? Not just the states that we're talking about, but even in New York. I was, we're blue and that was cool. But like, if you actually go and unpack the numbers, if you look at specific areas, even right here in New York City. So I'm not even talking about upstate New York, because that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not even talking about Long Island, which is like the whole island is pretty much red. But I'm just talking about even in New York City, if you look down, and I was looking in Queens and looking at how certain areas voted. I mean, Donald Trump got plus 40% right here in New York. And so I think I was more so just taken aback at just how close it was across the country. And just solidifying this thought that yes, racism is real, and that we're really split. And I think there really needs to be, and Stanley was getting to this changing of minds and hearts, right? Like there's clearly something happening with people's minds and hearts, and it's specifically around race. And how do we change that? How do we get people to recognize that it's not just about your whiteness, but it's about other things that impact you too? And so, yeah, I think I was just more so shocked at how close it was just across the country, not just in these specific areas, but across the country. It was really close.
That's why we got to give up on the white vote, honestly. If the Democratic Party spent more time focusing on the Hispanic vote and cultivating and doing more for the black vote, we'd be much better off. If we know that we're going to get about 40% of the white vote no matter what, and the rest of them are going to go for white supremacists like in the Republican Party and Donald Trump, why do we keep trying to speak to this mythical Rust Belt white voter who feels bad about racism? This election showed us that it doesn't matter what you do, they're still going to vote for white supremacy. Meanwhile, Biden won Pennsylvania because of black Philadelphia and black Atlanta and Flint and black Detroit and black and brown and indigenous Arizona. So, like, if white folks want to vote for their own demise, leave them be and focus on the people who understand what's happening here.
You know, Stanley, you brought up a great point. Tammy, Stanley is saying it's time for the Democratic Party to stop trying to court white voters. I don't think they would take such a radical stance because they have proven themselves. The establishment is, very moderate and conservative. And we even see at the DNC, how many Republicans did they have speaking? So, I mean, yeah, I agree with Stanley, but is something like that even feasible? What are your thoughts, Tammy?
I don't agree with that sentiment because unfortunately, white people, well, that sounds kind of mean, but, white people do make up the majority of this country. There are predictions that, POC will be the majority at some point, given immigration and, interracial marriages and childbearing, but we are well off from that. And unfortunately, if we want to progress our agenda, we have to get to the people that are holding us back. Now, I used to work with someone who I'm really close to. He's a white male organizer. And I remember in college, he was saying that he's always had this dream of organizing in the Rust Belt and in Bible Belt states. And my sort of thought to that is, well, why don't you? Like, white people are the ones who should be bussing themselves out during elections to all of these states where it seems like white voters are not on track on protecting even their very own interests, and they should be doing the work. Because consistently, in terms of the organizers actually showing out, it is POC progressive organizers. And we've proven with this election that we can collect our people and we can collect the majority, but it's too close, which means that white people, we can give up on white voters because that's not our job. But the majority of white people, the white people claiming that they are the good ones and they are not racist and they want to protect our collected vested interest in progressive politics and racial equality, those are the people who should be doing the work, not people like us.
Nantasha, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have to find some type of balance. I think the problem with the Democratic Party and why Black women push so hard to have a Black, because let's be clear, Kamala wouldn't be there if it wasn't for advocacy that Black women did behind the scenes to ensure that we had a Black woman VP. So I do think there is something to be said about acknowledging Black folk in the Democratic Party. But I think we need to find a happy medium. I think the party needs to prioritize and put resources behind other communities, particularly communities of color. But I do agree with Tammy that we can't just ignore the white vote. I just think that they shouldn't be prioritized. We shouldn't be prioritizing getting white folk to suddenly care about issues of people of color for votes, right? We need to better organize other groups of people.
Stanley, Nantasha says, and it sounds like Tammy as well, don't ignore, don't forget about the white vote. Just don't prioritize them, which is a slightly different take on what you're saying. Would you at least agree to that?
I don't think it's very different from what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We center white.
You said forget. Are
Well,
they saying just don't prioritize?
well, pardon me. Yeah, let me not say forget. Let's not prioritize them. They're not important. They don't vote right. Let's put them last. You know how the Lincoln Project got $67 million to flip Republicans to vote for Trump? Trump got higher Republican votes this time than he did last time. The Lincoln Project is going to use the rest of that money because they didn't spend all of it. They barely spent some of it. They're going to use that in 2022 to primary good progressives. So you know what? Put them last. White people don't need to be on top of anything. You know who we need to be talking to? Hispanic voters in Texas, Hispanic voters in Florida, those white Cubans who forgot that they still are people of color, no matter how good they feel in the little bubble of Florida. That's what we got to be speaking to. Because the fact of the matter is, we have seen there's not been a Democrat to win the majority of white votes since Kennedy in 1963. So why waste your time making these corny commercials to make the white guy who drives a big truck punches holes in his wall and tells his wife who to vote for to come support us, when you could put that energy into Javier, who's Puerto Rican and is here because Trump messed up Puerto Rico and now he's in Orlando and could vote for you? Let's stop playing these games. What about like Tamika, who's out in Flint, Michigan, organizing for clean water? Why don't you focus on those people and get their votes? Because turnout in Black communities and in brown communities, it hasn't even hit the ceiling yet. It was high, but it could be higher. And we could very easily win a lot more races across the country if we focus on those people.
Well, great point. And, you know, Stanley, when you were talking about some of the people that we should not be prioritizing, you know, it kind of, you know, those type of white voters, because they're still going to be here and they're still going to have these thoughts. Well, there's another type of white voter that's also still going to be here. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, even though Trump may be defeated, Trumpism and the brand of white racial grievance that he promotes and has been successful in spreading and emboldening is here to stay. It's here to stay. So what does this mean for American politics moving forward, Tammy?
So I think Trumpism is a very unique American perspective that sort of plays a part into populism, which countries all over the world are seeing. There's this idea that being a disgraced poor white person is a total mistake. And Trump speaks to those people that, you know, love charisma. They love the easy way out of things. They feel like it's easier to place blame on abstract concepts and people that they don't understand versus actually doing the work to change a system that also doesn't favor them. Trumpism is certainly here to stay because it's perpetuated by capitalism, which is the system that runs the world. As long as there are haves, there are the have-nots. And Trump is someone who uses the have-nots for his agenda to promise them the world that he cannot give them. Not only that he can't give them, but that he's actively using to step on and to get even more. So like Trumpism is a phenomenon that we need to break down by moving towards, you know, progressive politics. And honestly, the interesting racial part of that you can see in different parts of the world, right? Because immigrants are coming here and they have to do more to integrate into our society and to climb up, you know, socially, financially, etc. It is so easy for white people to just blame it on like race or immigration or the Dems giving our jobs away to foreigners. But the fact of the matter is that capitalism is bleeding itself out. And Trump and white people like him, rich white people who don't want to take blame and also don't want those people losing out to learn that it's them doing this to them, are using racial epithets and problematic speech and behavior to cast the blame and scapegoat it elsewhere. Unfortunately, that ideology is here to stay for a while, I think.
You know, Stanley, the Daily Beast reported that top officials in both the Democratic and Republican Party have said that, you know, Trumpism is here to stay. That brand of politics that Donald Trump, you know, talked about again, which is unapologetically racist, xenophobic. He just basically, it's almost like that Archie Bunky type of
It's being white.
caricature.
It's just being white. Let's just call it what it is. White supremacy.
Well, I will say, there's a difference in it because he was more emboldened. Like, I'm trying to say that other candidates, at least in my generation, I've never seen another candidate come on a political stage and say Mexicans are racist and are rapists and drug dealers. I've never seen another candidate say things like, these African countries and Haiti are S-hole countries. That's the type of brand of politics he was pushing. Yes, their policies may have been racist and may have disproportionately hurt Black communities, but Donald Trump definitely took things to a new level.
No, I mean, Donald Trump, like, the only thing the other politicians did was just clean it up with gaslit language. The policies are the same. It's just white supremacy. Trumpism is just loud racism. Like, let's be honest about what we're dealing with here. And the fact of the matter is Democrats and Republicans are very comfortable with it because it's the world that helps to uphold capitalism. All those people who don't wash their feet, who have crusty elbows and maybe have sex with their siblings that voted for Donald Trump, they're not going anywhere. And the rich people who also want to keep their money and who are also white, they're not going anywhere. So we really have to go on a big campaign to do anti-racism work to help poor white people understand why calling someone the N-word and voting for a white supremacist does not help your life. You need to be working with Black and brown people for your own liberation as well. But we can't get there until they understand that white supremacy is the problem. And Donald Trump makes them feel good about themselves because I might be poor. I might have diabetes. I might need an electric wheelchair to move around. I might smell. I might be related to my son because his mom is also my sister, but at least I'm not Black. And that's the work that we have to do. That's all Trumpism is. It's the stuff you hear when you go to Suffolk County, Long Island, when you go to Southern Brooklyn and you're in Bay Ridge, when you go to Texas. That's all it is. It's not some new thing.
Nantasha, racism is not new. It's as American as apple pie. But as to Stanley's point, it's louder. Trumpism is a louder form of racism that is more bold, more unapologetic, and we've seen how that amplified in his base and emboldened his base and the MAGA type of supporter. So what does this say about politics moving forward? The fact that this brand of politics was so successful. Are we going to see this moving forward now?
I definitely think we're going to see it moving forward because it hasn't gone anywhere. It's still here. And he set a precedence, right? He said, you can be loud and racist and you can almost win your reelection, right? Like, that's what Trump says. And so I think we're definitely going to see that. We have so many Trump supporters who are now in office, and I'm sure they're going to keep up with that same ideology. It's not going to go anywhere. And I think what you're seeing is I just watched a movie before joining this, and the guy, I like action movies. So the guy is literally on his death. He then got shot like 50 times. And he's still trying to pick up his gun to shoot people. And it's like, that's what I feel like whiteness is right now. It's like, they know that they're literally they're dying out. Like, white supremacy is something that's like, it's still it's here, but it's like, it's dwindling significantly. And I think they feel that, like, that's the energy. And so they're like literally like fighting to the death, right? Like, they're going to do everything in their power to maintain this type of order. Because they know this order is coming under major scrutiny and challenge. So whatever they can do to maintain this order, that's what they're going to do. And I think that's what we're fighting against. And I think it gets back to what Stanley said, which I love. He's so prophetic all the time, which is we really need to have we need to change hearts and minds. And I think sometimes in politics, when we talk about policy, we're talking about things on a piece of paper that, Joe Schmo in Arkansas may not understand, right? Because we're not changing his heart and mind around an idea. We just have this particular policy and we're expecting that this policy will change everything, but we forget the human touch. And so I think politically what we need to do is we need to continue to organize. We can't go back to sleep. All of this amazing organizing that's been done, especially around communities of color, we need to keep that going. And then we need to organize other communities. But the heart of that is changing their hearts and minds. We really have to change the way in which people think. I mean, I don't want to go down the whole soliloquy, but I was shocked by some of the things that I heard between, Ice Cube and all the conversations that was happening on socials around that. It's like there's something happening with hearts and minds and how that affects policy and politics.
Yeah, can we be honest about the men? I'm sorry, Selena, about the black men who support Trump. It's not because no one's listening to them. There's a few of them who feel like no one's listening to them, and we can work on those folks. But the majority of the men who are upset, the black men who are upset with the Democratic Party, they are mad because what we're fighting for would not allow them to have the same power that white men had. They're mad because we're pushing policies to support the LGBTQIA community. They're mad because women have more rights. They're mad because we're not censoring men and black men. That's why they're mad. And that shows you we need to do a lot of work on dealing with patriarchy and misogyny. But this idea that we're ignoring black men when there's a 22-page document that outlines what the Biden-Harris administration would do for black people is complete BS. Tell Ice Cube to lotion his elbows and go to therapy.
Thank you for that, Stanley. And, we could not have this conversation without talking about black women and in particularly Stacey Abrams. In fact, we wouldn't be having this conversation because Donald Trump would have been reelected president. I started this show talking about the predominantly black communities that came out in droves and got Joe Biden elected. And we talked about Atlanta. But it was Stacey Abrams who, if you ask me, had her campaign for governor stolen from her in 2018 because of voter suppression. And instead of shying away or dimming her light, she decided to take a stance. And through her organization, she increased voter turnout. She literally, as a result of her work, hundreds of thousands of people, particularly minorities, registered to vote. And because of the efforts, they actually came out and they did vote. And Joe Biden can thank Stacey Abrams and her work in particular in Georgia for the lead that he got there. And I wanted to talk about that, especially with you, Nantasha, as a woman in politics. First-handedly that, being a black woman was not something that was always welcomed or inviting, even in the Democratic Party. We don't see enough black women running or being supported in the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts on, Stacey Abrams, black women, the fact that we came out again to save this democracy? And do you ultimately think that our loyalty will be reciprocated?
Yeah, I am remaining optimistic. And I say that because if you look at the Biden campaign, if you even look at, who they chose chief of staff for Kamala, a black woman, if you look at what Stacey did, and again, I said this earlier before, if you look at the fact that we even had a black and Indian American woman as VP, that was because of the advocacy of black women. So I think the Democratic Party knows that is a very important constituency that they cannot ignore. I was also looking at Joe Biden's transition team. There's a very important black woman on his transition team. And so I think I'm optimistic. What I do feel though is that we have to literally keep the same energy, right? So we can't be like, okay, Kamala's in office, we got a few black people here. No. We have to keep the same energy. We have to continue to hold the Democratic Party accountable. This is the time to not sort of go back to sleep and say, yay, black women won. We finally arrived. No, because we know there are issues that are very unique to black women in their communities that still have not been addressed. We know that black women are still not where they need to be in terms of power and placement, in terms of decision making. So I think this is the time for black women to double down and continue to organize ourselves to really, really push the needle. But I know the Democratic Party, they're not stupid. They're well aware of what has happened. For me, I'm just remaining optimistic for what they'll do next. And so that's my thoughts.
Robert Weicher from Facebook says Biden can thank Harris for getting the black vote. If his VP was white, then Trump would have won. So, thank you for chiming in there. Tammy, Nantasha says she's optimistic about the Democratic Party. You, on the other hand, have been a very vocal critic of the Democratic Party. Are you optimistic at all?
Nope. Honestly, no. And the reason is that Dems are using their same old tricks as before and refuse to be, well, Let's put it this way. Dems are fighting so hard against the very progressives and the very people that get them elected. Black women and Black people in particular showed up and showed out to protect this vote. And they may have given us Harris, but it took damn near a long time and a lot of begging for that. Now, did Biden concede a little bit to progressives? Did he work with Bernie Sanders? Yes, but there's a lot that could have been done. Now, even more people are saying, we shouldn't have used the word socialism or socialist in this election, and that it cost us a lot of Democratic votes. Why is that the case? I think Democrats are not open to change, and it's people like Stacey Abrams who are necessary to keep doing the work to make sure that at the very least, the people showing up to support them can continue to support them. Now, if Democrats really cared, they would have fought a lot harder to keep Stacey Abrams' platform in Georgia much stronger. I do think that she was robbed of the governor's seat. I do think that she's consistently robbed of the respect that she deserves. And I think it's really telling how whole groups go unnoticed until they show out in millions. Now, I'm optimistic about my generation, our generation, millennials and Gen Z, who are pushing the status quo to accept this sort of new reality that many of us are poor, many of us are dying, we need free healthcare, we need student debt relief, we need people to not turn away people at the polls for no reason. We need to remove cops from the situation where they can, intimidate voters. But it worries me that the Democratic establishment isn't moving forward with these initiatives. It worries me that it's organizers who are going so hard for this and that the Dems are seemingly pushing back against this. Because the Dems worked so hard and honestly successfully so to court moderate Republicans, I'm worried about what the next few years will look like, because they made promises to those people too, promises that directly abash the progressive promises that I was kind of hopeful for. So I would say I'm less optimistic, but that doesn't mean that I will stop fighting or discourage people from fighting, because I do think there needs to be accountability.
So Franklin Eric says, he chimed in via LinkedIn, Stacey Abrams broke the barrier in Georgia. Can't forget the great late John Lewis, who passed the torch and fought for our people, African Black Americans, up until his death. Thank you so much, Franklin, for chiming in. Stanley, I want to get your thoughts here. We're hearing, two, different sides about, being optimistic about the Democratic Party moving forward. Where do you stand? And what does the Democratic Party need to do in order to make sure that they don't forget about the Black vote and Black women, again?
Can I actually throw it to Nantasha first? I know she wanted to respond to Tammy.
Yes. I'll be very quick. I agree with everything you said, Tammy. I'm just optimistic that perhaps they'll listen a little bit more, but by no means do I think, and that's why I keep saying, this is not the time to say, okay, yay, they get it, let me go back to sleep now, and this is it. No, I think we need to literally keep the pressure on them, hey, organizers really handed this to you. Hey, Black women really handed this to you. What are you gonna do for us? And use this win to further our fight and our message. So I just want to clarify that. I agree with you. I'm just optimistic that because once again we delivered, and once again we worked really hard to make this happen, that we as the people who made this happen continue that fight. We don't go back to sleep, and we use this win to further our goals.
Yeah.
And we need you on the council, girl. We need you on the council, because look at what happened with the defund initiative. Bloop. That's a big example here in the city.
And
and just to because I know we are getting down to the wire, and just to move things along, Tammy, there was a report that came out that a number of Democrats from moderate states or more conservative states that won House seats, they said that the defund campaign actually hurt their chances and that they barely won. So I don't, as much pressure as we're putting on the Democrats, I think that they are answering, there's a certain degree that they are answering to their constituents who are still not educated enough and still view a lot of policies as too radical and too progressives, and they have to answer to that. But we do have to just wrap this conversation up. Before we do, What are the next steps moving forward, Stanley? We won this election. Obviously, we need to think we are indebted to Black women in particular, but what needs to be done moving forward so that this country can move towards progress for the next few decades, and that we don't go backward like we did after electing Barack Obama and then having Donald Trump?
It's very simple. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will, which means we have to continue to organize. You think Trump was just doing this stuff because he was this racist and stupid? Sure, some of it, but those Supreme Court justices, those judge picks all across the US, he got those people in there because the right pushed him to do that. And we have to be prepared to push Joe Biden to do the same thing. Right now, the Biden administration is talking about forgiving up to $50,000 in student loan debt for all Americans who have student loan debt. Why not make it all of it? We should be organizing him and the administration and pushing them to the left. As far as stuff like defund and the police reform work needs to happen, the fact of the matter is, for most people, defunding police was a brand new conversation that popped up after George Floyd. Anyone would tell you, and when you're building a campaign, it has to be a multi-year campaign because you need space to educate. Now is our time to educate, to flip the worldview, and get more people on our side. The Democrats are 100% wrong if they think that people voted for Trump because they didn't want to defund the police. They don't even know what that means. And no one in the establishment has done the work to do education, and they won't. So we need organizing. It always comes back to organizing.
Tammy, final thoughts on what needs to be done moving forward so that we can continue to look forward to progress in this country?
Besides organizing, I want to say education, because I feel like a lot of liberals, like I've been making fun of this all week, a lot of liberals, now that Biden won, are going to go back to their little cubby holes and drink their white wine, go to brunch, and just vibe like everything's okay. It's still not okay. Like on a local level, New York has crazy rates of income inequality and poverty. And this is something that is unacceptable to me as a local organizer. But I need to acknowledge the fact that I don't know enough about national organizing, and I don't know enough about the pockets of people that overwhelmingly either voted for Trump or had no idea what comes next. And so I would say if there's a particular issue that is on your mind, do the research on it. Google local organizations that talk about, student debt or racial inequality. I know I, for one, am going to lean on the Southern Poverty Law Center to research racial injustice on a national scale and what can be done to reach all of those people that voted for Trump overwhelmingly. And besides that, I'm going to keep my eye on local politicians. Just because New York is blue, that doesn't mean that our elected officials are going to keep pushing for progressive issues, but I'm going to make sure that they do.
Nantasha, I'll give you the last word. Again, as a woman who is running for an elected seat, as an elected official, we know that obviously you are doing all you can and going above and beyond to make sure that politics and democracy works in the favor of people of color in particular. But what else? What advice, what nuggets would you leave for all of us watching who say, like, yeah, this was a great win, but what about the next 4 years? What about the next 40 years?
Yeah, I think we need to listen. And we don't spend enough time listening to real people that have real issues and working to solve those issues. And that's what I'm about, right? I don't have all the answers. And, we talked about education. I don't know everything, but I want to listen. I want to hear what you feel your issue is, and let's figure out how to solve it. Another thing that I always say is, what does it look like to campaign when you're not campaigning? When you're not actually going to say, vote for this candidate, but you're just campaigning about particular issues like bailing out students, right? Like, what does it look like to literally do all this energy, all these things that we do to get people into office? What does it look like to do grassroots organizing just to simply educate people and organize them around issues? And I don't think that we do that. I think we spend a lot of time and energy around elections. But then after elections, we don't sort of keep the same energy. I think that's like my theme. We don't keep the same energy. We don't organize people around particular issues. We don't educate them around the issues so they can be informed. We don't even sort of educate them on how they can use their power as a voter to sort of push for change. And we don't listen. And so I think that's particularly for me, where I want to see things go. I want us to kind of continue to organize people, continue to educate people around issues, because it's very nuanced. So if you're not studied, you don't really understand what people are actually trying to say, and you don't understand that it can actually have a positive impact on you. So let's educate you, let's organize you, and let's listen to what you have to say as well. So it's like a mixture of what Tammy and Stanley said, because this is what I've been saying. Like, what's next? How do we sort of continue to get people to stay active and not go back to sleep?
Thank you so much for that, Nantasha. 100% agree with you, sis. And I just want to end by saying, this election proved a lot. Not only did it prove the power of Black voters and Black women, and I'm going to continue saying it, I don't care if I sound like a broken record, but it also proved that a white president could go as far as refusing to denounce a far-right group that's been labeled misogynistic, Islamophobic, and anti-immigration during a debate. He actually told them to stand back and stand by, and millions of white folks still came out and voted for him. It also proves that despite the fact that he told non-white congressional women they should go back to their crime-infested places where they came from, that's a quote, and he also told neo-Nazis in Charlottesville that they were very fine people, that again, millions of white voters won't care and will still go out and vote. And the fact is that the fact I mentioned at the, earlier in the show, he called Africa, Haiti and Salvadorian immigrants, that he said that they all came from S-hole countries. Yeah, millions of white people did not care, right? They don't care. But I feel like even though that's a grim reality that we're suffering from, and yeah, it just reaffirms that, yeah, America really is that racist. It shows the power, the collective power of what happens when we come out, organize and mobilize, and we take this country back. Because the fact of the matter is, it was built on the backs of our ancestors. We deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. And I think we're all getting to a point where, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And yes, we voted in Biden and Harris. And for the next 4 years, we're going to show them that, you know what, you work for us, or else you won't be reelected. Donald Trump was a one-term president. And I have no problem telling this current administration the same thing. You will be a one-term president. You will have a one-term administration if you do not show up for us in the way we need. We are sick and tired. So on that note, I want to thank everyone who chimed in to Be Heard Talk today. Thank you so much for the comments. We saw them all. We just couldn't read them all, but appreciate that. I want to thank again Nantasha Williams. Nantasha, really quickly, how can people support your candidacy right now in New York City?
Yes, well, you can't do anything without money. So that is the biggest thing. So you can go to my website, www.nantashawilliams.com, make a donation, sign up to join my listserv. We'll have some volunteer opportunities as well. Send me a prayer up, whatever you can do. But yeah, www.nantashawilliams.com. Oh, on Instagram, it's at Nantasha2021. And just whatever support you can offer, advice, right? I keep saying I want to listen. Like, I really want to hear from people. I'm not one of those people that say I have all the answers. I want to also listen to other thoughts and other solutions to the problems that we're facing here in New York City.
Absolutely. So again, guys, we'll see you again next Sunday. Continue to stand up and be heard. Thank you.